light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Xenia Grant, who, like myself, is a person with high-functioning autism, and we wanted to address this subject of autism more completely. But before we get into all that, perhaps you could share a little bit more of what your background is in terms of dealing with autism.
It started back in 1986 when I was a junior in college, when Temple Grandin's first book, Emergence Labeled Autistic, came out.
The first book was?
Emergence Labeled Autistic.
Emergence Labeled Autistic.
By Temple Grandin back in 1986.
Oh, I understand. Emergence, labeled autistic.
That is, yes.
Because she was labeled autistic and she was finally emerging from that because nobody could communicate with her for the first part of her life.
For her first 4 or 5 years, and she went to specialized, back in New England in those days, she went to like a small private elementary school.
Okay.
Then she was then Temple went to a big girls' school, and then she went to in New England they have boarding schools, and she was at a boarding school until she went to college.
Okay.
But my background is I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
I was born 7th kid out of 8 from a large Roman Catholic family.
Okay.
And my mom had rubella or German measles during her 5th week of pregnancy. This was back in 1964. I was born in 1965.
Okay. And you consider that to be the influence that made you high-functioning autistic?
Yes, something kicked in something else.
Okay. But in your case, you're not assigning it to a vaccine. You're assigning it to the actual occurrence of a disease during pregnancy.
Yeah, that's right. The vaccine didn't come until like 1968, 69 because of the German measles epidemic in 1964.
Okay. And just to be clear, there are some people who believe that faulty vaccines cause autism, some who believe that autism is caused by the experience of diseases, some who believe that it is significant amounts of hereditary predisposition. The bottom line is, for the present time, we simply don't know what the cause of autism is. It's a combination of things we think, but the exact cause could be any of these things, but none of them have been definitively proven as the cause.
As of date, that is correct.
Okay. I had to laugh. I was on a social networking site a week or so ago and stumbled onto this page that was making fun of how the causes of autism are so debated. And it was a picture of a cat with glasses on and a little shop coat in front of a chalkboard, like in a university setting. And it said, today's cause of autism is that time in your grade school when, I don't remember, it was something totally wacky and goofy, like the time you were bullied in 3rd grade or something like that.
Yeah, understood.
There is lots of possible causes, and we'll talk about that later.
Absolutely.
But nothing for sure.
And not only that, but in my mind, that's not the most important question.
To me, the most important question would be learning how to cope with it.
Absolutely. We need to learn how to cope with the here and now, because the past is past and the future is unknowable. So we need to deal with the present.
Or at least unformed.
Unformed, yes.
We can speculate where things might be going.
Yes.
But we won't really know for certain until we get there.
Absolutely.
But it seems that there is much less knowledge than knowledge about autism at the present time, and which is why we're doing these shows.
Absolutely. And as I said, it's the Middle East of disabilities. It's that complex because you're dealing with a whole spectrum. It manifests itself in many ways in different people. Donna Williams in her blog calls it like a fruit salad.
Okay.
No two autistic people are alike.
Which is why they call it a spectrum, but that's what makes it so incredibly challenging to a world that wants to focus on generalization.
And generalization doesn't work because we're so individual. It's we're all different kinds of plants like pansies and roses and chrysanthemums and lilies, and we're all
Yeah. The natural world includes virtually infinite diversity.
and
But humanity seems to have this fascination with putting everybody in known categories.
yes, and whereas I think we by our all of a lot of us on the spectrum, we manifest it in different ways. We are human. We just happen to have autism. It's not the entirety of us. I don't wear just one hat. I wear many hats.
I would say that autism affects the way we relate to everything, and so it's kind of like it's sort of there in every way, and yet not in a way that you can say for certain what everything is.
Oh, absolutely.
It's an influence. It's not a. I mean, it's like asking, how does food taste when you put salt in it?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on which food.
Absolutely.
Because you have salt on meat, and you have salt in cakes, and you have salt on vegetables, and salt doesn't express itself the same way in every situation because it combines with whatever is there.
Absolutely, and not only that, but we are more than, a lot of people use a deficit model, whereas you're finding more and more positive traits about having autism.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's simply a different way of
it's
processing.
a different way of being, it's a different way of processing. It involves the sensory, it involves the physical, it involves, a lot more than people realize.
There's so many things we could say, but for the moment, trying to stay focused on our subject of what does the spectrum include. I found one place on the internet where they said it was one of the worst examples. It was an example. The movie Rain Man, starring Dustin Hoffman. There's a number of autistic qualities demonstrated there, but I don't think it's wise to generalize them.
It isn't. But you got to remember when Rain Man came out in 1988, 1989, that actually was quite revolutionary at its time period.
Well, it was introducing a subject
Yes,
that 90% of the people had never even thought about.
Absolutely. And it showed a savant form of autism.
Which savants are actually a minority of autistics.
Yeah, I used to be a savant as a kid. If you would have asked me, let's say 40 years ago, what day was February 6, 1958 on, I could have told you the day. If you asked me in 2014, what day was February 6, 1958 was on, it's like, I don't know.
So savant is not a quality that an autistic necessarily has throughout life.
Some of them do, some of them don't. I know people who are savants. I also know, I've been fortunate in the last 26 years that I've met lots of different kinds of people on the spectrum, and it's so varied that it's even hard to generalize about it.
And I guess I would just say, well, then we shouldn't be generalizing, but that's easier said than done because our world is so oriented around generalizations.
And the reason why it's oriented around generalizations is that people are trying to understand something, and when you want to understand something, you tend to block out all the details and.
Well, which is what I frequently hear described as neurotypical thinking.
Yeah.
Neurotypical, or NT, is what people who are autistic use to describe people who are not autistic.
Absolutely. I personally don't use the word neurotypical because every human being is unique, and I also think about the cultural things. Neurotypical human being. To me, when I hear neurotypical, I think of white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, or Jewish.
Okay.
Not Hispanic, not Arab, not African, not Chinese.
Okay.
Because in the autism movement, in the last 25 years, it's been the Jews and those who come from elite, what you call white families, who have coalesced the movement.
Created all the basic general thinking about autism.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I guess what's your response then? I've read a number of places that neurotypicals, when they think about anything or look at anything, tend to see the generalities first and the details second.
Absolutely.
On autistics, it's like our brains are wired backwards because we see the details first and the generalities second.
Absolutely. And that does affect how things are thought about. It also affects bigotry and politics.
Okay.
Because most non-autistic people, they go from general to specific. So what happens is that when you generalize too much, then you start having the bigotries, then you start having the prejudices, then you start saying, my nation is better than your nation.
Because at the heart of all bigotry and prejudice is simply the perception of someone being different.
That's right.
And the assumption that being different is not okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If roles were reversed and we started from an autistic perspective, then generality to me would seem like incomplete work.
At times, yes, because you're leaving out the life of things, when the details.
Yeah. Well, if you did a complete work, you would have made conscious recognition of the details.
Absolutely.
The details are what I see first, and then I have to look at the details long enough to figure out what they all have in common.
Oh, absolutely. I do the same thing myself. I mean, that's why I read many different points of view, because you learn from each point of view. Everybody has something substantive and something good to say, and I think certain people forget that.
Well, and in this move toward integration, everybody seems to want to be inclusive.
Yes.
But I understand, as much as I applaud the intention to be inclusive, I'm not sure that many of the people saying that really know what they're talking about.
I think the reason why they don't know what they're talking about is because they think of it from a political viewpoint rather than a personal viewpoint.
Well, and they also think of it from a generality perspective.
Yeah.
Rather than an autistic perspective of noticing the details.
Yeah.
So they want to be inclusive, and it's like, okay, so we'll bring you into the room, and now we're being inclusive. And I would say, no, not really.
Yeah.
To be truly inclusive, you have to come up with an inclusive paradigm
Absolutely.
that sees everybody, each individual, as a complex package of numerous diverse qualities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Instead of saying, well, everybody in the room is whatever. Well, everybody in the room isn't anything.
Absolutely. What it is what you're talking about in a way is the melting pot theory.
Okay.
Of America, where you're Irish, you're French, you're Chinese, you're Arab, you're what have you, and then you just become mushy and become just like.
Well, you lose all individual identification.
Yeah. Yeah.
And suddenly you aren't who you are anymore. You're supposed to be the embodiment of a category. But there is no individual who's the embodiment of a category. Absolutely. Even within autistics.
Absolutely.
Other frequent terms, high functioning or low functioning.
I think those are, the English language is not a very good language at describing things.
Okay.
And I don't like high functioning or low functioning because because mainly it prejudices a lot of people that if you can talk and you live independently and you take the bus to work, you're high functioning. But if you use augmentative forms of communication and you have a lot of apraxia and have to...
Apraxia is...
Your body not knowing where it is in space. It's almost a cerebral palsy type of condition where...
Okay.
Where your mind wants to do something, but your body won't do what the mind wants it to do.
Okay. Is that related to a phenomenon I saw in one movie where it was a woman with autism who would describe emotions that she wasn't projecting in her facial expressions?
That can be, but I'm thinking more of when I've had people who used augmentative forms of communication tell me that their body just is almost discombobulated and disjointed and they don't know where it is in space. They want to do something and they can't do it.
A way for someone in the viewing audience to experience that would be to say, close your eyes, now tell me where your hand is.
Something like that.
And they would say, well, it's at my side, or it's on my lap, or it's on my chest, or they can tell where their hand is.
It's a little more complex than that.
Okay.
But it's getting...
That's the basic idea?
It's a basic idea. I mean, if you read people who use augmentative forms of communication, they talk a lot about sensory and motor.
Okay. Motor skills is how you
Gross
can move.
motor and fine motor, and if
Gross motor and fine motor.
Yeah, and and knowing where your body's in space, knowing, even not feeling disjointed within your body.
Okay. But a lot of these sound almost more like actual physical disabilities.
Actually, in my mind, I consider autism, they call it, to me, it's a physical and neurological disability, and people who aren't familiar with autism look at the behavioral rather than the physical.
I think I would call it more of a condition than a disability.
Fascinating. That's an accurate term.
To me, a disability, more accurately, means not being able to do an ability.
And also...
But I want to contrast that with socially. Disability frequently, in practice, actually means nothing more than you're different than the norm.
Absolutely, and how society views what is the norm. I mean, one of the things...
The disability isn't an inability, it's the fact that you can't do it the way everyone else does it.
Absolutely. How society...
You have to do it your own way.
Yeah, how society deems whatever is acceptable.
It's like a blind person being able to read a novel in Braille.
Yeah.
Are they disabled? They can read the novel, I can read the novel, we simply read it in different ways.
Which is fine with me as long as you read the novel. I mean,
but on the flip side, you've got people who are still looking for a way to do a particular activity because they can't read the novel anyway. Not by Braille, not by sight, not by anything. They just can't read the novel. That to me would be more truly a disability. But I object to the times when disability is nothing more than an excuse for you're different, so I'm looking down on you because you don't do it the way I do it.
Absolutely, and that's
wrong.
Not only is it wrong, but it's almost egocentric, saying I am
very
the center of the
narcissistic.
world. I am God and you're not.
The world is meant to serve me and you have to accommodate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I recall hearing somebody talk about, I believe it was a deaf child, and this was in the first part of the 20th century, and the father felt he was doing his son a favor by denying him learning sign language, that he was going to have to live in a world that communicated verbally, so the only way his son was allowed to learn how to interact was by becoming really, really expert at lip reading. He was not allowed to learn sign language. And to me, it's so crippling. It sounds like inappropriate parenting, but that was a choice that reflected the values of the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sign language is considered a foreign language. And people...
But that's where I would say we need an inclusive paradigm.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Where we can talk both with words and with hands.
Yeah.
We should be multilingual instead of saying which language is the only right one.
Yeah, and not only that, in my mind, I only care if the message gets across. How it gets across is not that important to me.
Which the fascinating thing about autism, now that computers are becoming more developed, is there are people who are nonverbal who are finding ways to communicate using sophisticated computer programs.
Oh, yeah.
And the statements that they're composing are kind of mind-blowing. The woman who was completely nonverbal and through the computer communicated, that this is such an unfair double standard.
Yeah.
That in order to live, I have to learn your language, but you don't have to learn mine.
Yeah.
If it was a two-way street where everyone who was not deaf had to learn sign language so that they could communicate with everyone who is deaf without making it a one-way street where the deaf person has to learn how to communicate with the others, but not vice versa. I mean, that's unfair.
Understood. Understood.
But there are so many advantages to learning both anyway. I mean, being multilingual is clearly an advantage.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm not multilingual. I know a little bit of Spanish, but yeah, but because we're not. I mean, I think people would be a lot better off if it's not my way or the highway mentality, but that everybody has something to offer.
Yeah, and everyone is a gift to humanity, and it's a question of learning how to utilize the gift.
Absolutely.
The unique gift of each person.
Absolutely.
To me, whenever I say high and low functioning, I always have to remind myself, this is not about level of intelligence.
No.
This is simply a matter of the ability to function within the dominant social environment.
Exactly, exactly.
Low functioning simply means this person has more challenges to communication than most other people.
Not only more challenges to communication, but also their body doesn't work as well. There may be health problems involved.
Okay.
In a number of factors.
Okay.
And also in American society, this whole idea of being independent. I mean, what is independence? You have others and you have God, and I think our society's forgotten that.
Yeah. And I think in some ways we have built this notion of independence to an unrealistic and actually untrue expectation.
I think you're right.
That we are much more interdependent than we want to admit. That if the farmer and the truck driver and the stock clerk and everybody else doesn't get the food onto the shelf at the grocery store, we will be totally at a loss to know how to eat.
Absolutely.
Most people don't know how to grow a carrot.
Absolutely. I mean, and especially someone who was either brought up in the urban area or suburban area. I'm an urbanite. I wouldn't know what to do if I was on the farm anyway. Gee, that silo looks really pretty. I mean, we are much more interdependent than we realize, and I think, especially in today's world, I think people have forgotten that.
What that conveys to me about high-functioning autism, then, is that this person may be able to do a lot of typical things, but they still have autism. And, I'm not saying that as a problem or something wrong with them. It's that they have a different way of relating to the world, and in order to have their best contribution, we have to integrate that way of relating to the world so that they can be part of everything that's going on, and so that we can benefit from their contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ways I think of it is that not everybody can be an eye, not everybody can be a hand or an ear. It's like a watch. We need, finally,
we need all the pieces working together.
We need all the pieces to work together, and I think we've forgotten that.
Coming back to our subject, though, of what the spectrum includes, this would be to say that if you meet someone who self-identifies as low-functioning, just because they aren't necessarily responding in a way that you understand, don't totally ignore them.
No.
Include them in what's going on. Smile at them every so often, even if you can't really have a conversation. On the flip side, if someone's high-functioning and identifies as such, maybe just as one little point to start, focus on the details, because that's what they're seeing first. And I've run into some people who identify as high-functioning autistic, and the first thing they run into with people is others not wanting to believe that they are autistic.
I get that occasionally too.
You're much too smart to be autistic.
No,
the doctor must have misdiagnosed you.
Or you're too verbal. You speak
too verbal.
so well. You use language so well.
If you can talk, then clearly you can't really be autistic.
Or you're too friendly. You're too outgoing. You're too, that you get along with people. It's like,
It's more to it than that.
Absolutely.
My whole life, I teeter on the brink of feeling overwhelmed by everything around me.
Understood.
Not because I have some anxiety problem, simply because I'm getting so much information all the time. It's like having 300 people yelling at you every minute of the day.
That's why I take naps in the afternoon sometimes. It's because I think I get sensorily overloaded and I need to shut
And there are
down.
times where if I'm in a really chaotic situation too long, I just suddenly feel very, very tired.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because my brain has been working so hard.
Understood. I mean, and we live in an overwhelming society in that.
We're almost out of time, though, I'm afraid.
Okay.
These shows always go so quickly. Is there any final thought, I guess, in terms
that you know, that we're here to stay, and we contribute to civilization for the greater good.
And there's always something to be gained by including a unique perspective. Every person you encounter, autistic or not, will help you see something that you otherwise wouldn't even see.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for what you've shared today.
Oh, may God bless.
And thank you for watching.